Hello, everyone. Patrick O'Connor here with NetSPI, and today it's my privilege to introduce to you our topic, Dynamic Duo, Empowering Underwriting with Proactive Security, and our speakers. But before I get into introducing our speakers, one quick housekeeping item. You'll notice we have our Q&A session open. We welcome your questions there. Our speakers are available to answer as many of your questions as they possibly can during our webinar together today. So we welcome, encourage, look forward to your engagement there. And with that, I'm going to go into some details on our speakers. We've got with us today Craig Guiliano, Head of Threat Intelligence and Policyholder Services at Chubb, where he's focused on improving cyber insurance underwriting outcomes and the security posture of Chubb's policyholders through a comprehensive understanding of the cyber threat environment and providing valuable cyber services. We also have with us today Nabil Hannan from NetSPI. He is our field CISO, and he leads the company's advisory consulting practice, focusing on helping clients solve their cybersecurity assessment and threat and vulnerability management needs. He also hosts our podcast, Agents of Influence. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, I'd encourage you to go out there and check it out today. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Nabil, where he's going to kick things off for us. Nabil, over to you.
Well, Patrick, thank you so much. And Craig, really excited to get this conversation going today. And as we start, Craig, anything you want to focus on or get started with?
Yeah, I think maybe we start with just defining attack surface. What does that mean in the context of our partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. So the attack surface challenge that organizations have today, it's something that everybody's trying to tackle. And the whole point of what we're trying to do with our attack surface management offering is help organizations better understand what type of assets they have that are facing the internet today on the perimeter. We have a very good understanding today of what exposures are there, and especially from threat intelligence that we've gathered to know what attackers are trying in the wild and how they're trying to find exposures that they can then probe and get deeper into. So from that perspective, our attack surface, your attack surface as an organization, is anything that you're exposing to the internet that can be hit from the internet by anyone that has access to the internet. So, attackers, they go where the vulnerabilities are, they go where the money is, and guess what? They also go where the weakest link is. So if they find vulnerabilities on the internet that you're exposing that is easy to actually exploit, that's where they're going to start, and that's typically where they go to sniff and look for potential opportunities to find breaches in organizations.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And we do quite a bit of research, threat intelligence research, both through claims information, through partnerships and what have you, to identify what exactly threat actors are exploiting, whether that's vulnerabilities or services that are exposed to the internet. Certainly phishing is a continuous problem as well. So we actually have quite good information on what threat actors are attacking. And working with NetSPI, we think we can identify those exposures before they turn into a ransomware event or some other incident that neither Chubb nor our policyholders want to experience.
So, Craig, it would be interesting for me to understand from you. I know we've been partnering on this together for almost 2 years now, but it would be very helpful to understand why Chubb has decided to work with NetSPI when it comes to helping their policyholders better understand what their attack surface exposures look like.
Yeah, I think the first thing is, obviously, NetSPI does work for Chubb InfoSec, our IT environment. And obviously, we have a long-standing relationship there. But I would say from an attack surface management perspective, what we like about NetSPI is it's human curated. Oftentimes, we misattribute assets to policyholders. Obviously, that causes a bit of consternation both on our end and our policyholders' side as well. And the human curation elements of what NetSPI does helps eliminate or greatly reduce false positives. so we can truly concentrate on the exposures that we know matter. That improves the accuracy of the findings, obviously, and certainly the way that we're rolling out the pilot, we can get an accurate depiction of our policyholders' attack surface at the time of underwriting. As we'll get into later in our conversation, our policyholders have the exact same information that we have. We can have a more intelligent, a more pointed conversation about the findings, about the exposures that we know matter. Because again, a lot of this is commoditized. I mean, anything that's connected to the internet, any assets that connect to the internet, anybody can see it, anybody can exploit it, and that's what we're focused on.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you mentioned the whole human curation of the vulnerabilities and exposures that we list out. I think the benefit there too for the policyholders is the fact that you can get to near zero false positive, because we actually have humans that are validating that a certain issue that may have been discovered by a tool or some sort of automation is truly exploitable and truly belongs to the organization as well. Often, with anyone who's run tools before, especially looking for vulnerabilities on the internet, I think they understand inherently that they tend to be very noisy from a false positive perspective. So having that human curation is something NetSPI prides itself in. And even though we have great technology and great automation and tooling that we leverage, it's the human element that we bring to the table that I think is where most of our customers see value in, and we're excited to pass that on to Chubb policyholders as well. Craig, would love to understand from you too, is beyond just the human curation and the testing itself, is there any additional value that you're seeing from NetSPI's attack surface management solution as well, both to Chubb and as well as the policyholders?
Yeah, I think this is a key element. I think the biggest differentiator with NetSPI is the testing and validation component of the assessment. Going beyond what we generally refer to as passive collection or enumeration, we're actually testing and validating the exposures that we find to reduce, again, those false positives that might be prevalent in other tools. And quite frankly, that's why we're asking for consent from our policyholders. We think there's tremendous value in what they'll derive from the NetSPI findings. But in order to do this, the testing and validation component of the assessment, we'd like their consent before moving forward. Obviously, we know any testing can cause issues, but at this point, we feel really confident working with NetSPI that the probability of that occurring is near zero. But nonetheless, we want our policyholders to be aware that we're conducting these assessments so they can see the value of it on the back end. Another component of it is, working with NetSPI in various capacities. We've noted that NetSPI identifies more vulnerabilities than maybe some competitors can. In that case, we're dedicated to helping our policyholders identify vulnerabilities proactively, whether they're new, recently identified vulnerabilities or existing vulnerabilities that are on CISO's known exploitable vulnerability list. Identifying as many of them as we possibly can from the outset is extremely important. And we've seen how these vulnerabilities have led to ransomware events and sometimes cat events. Focus on NetScaler exposure, for instance, and other vulnerabilities that exist. And in a lot of cases, even though the version might indicate that the software is vulnerable to attack, there might be other conditions that need to be met in order for that exposure to be real. And NetSPI can help us identify not just if the system is exposed to a particular vulnerability based on its CPE information, but also if other conditions that might be required are present to make it actually exploitable. And then we can help our policyholders focus on those issues.
And I think part of the consent piece that's also important to highlight is that the testing we're doing has some active components to it as well. So, although we're not doing anything like denial of service or trying to, actually cause a disruption in an organization's business, I think we all understand that even benign tests can often lead to consequences that are unexpected, which is why we want to make sure that there's that sign off and consent required before we go in and do the testing. Although we're confident we're not going to take down systems and servers, and it's something that we pride ourselves in. And then, Craig, I wanted to highlight an example, especially since you mentioned that we're able to identify more vulnerabilities than many other companies. A good example of that that is a testament to our research team actually was when the rapid reset vulnerability in the CVE was released. When it was released, once we had the details, we actually had a contest internally with our research team to see who could come up with a POC to build automation that would detect it across all of our attack surface customers. And believe it or not, we had an automated POC that was ready within 45 minutes of the CVE being released. And within 2 hours, we actually had ability to let our customers see exactly where they were leveraging HTTP2, which was what was the protocol that was affected with the rapid reset issue. We could show them that protocol in platform within 2 hours of the CVE being released. So just to show you how rapidly we work, looking for new vulnerabilities and constantly doing research and building automation to be able to do it at scale across all our customers.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we know that new vulnerabilities are exploited very quickly. According to CISO, within 3 days, new vulnerabilities that are identified are being exploited in the wild. So being able to identify vulnerabilities quickly, accurately, and more importantly, without disruption is a key component and a key element of why we're working with NetSPI.
And then the other piece too that I want to make sure that Chubb policyholders understand and get a comfort level from is understanding that even when we do find a vulnerability, we're not going through and fully exploiting it to cause any type of damage. Because it is all human curated, we're actually performing just enough testing to get the indicators that allow us to have the confidence that a vulnerability is exploitable. We're not going through and deleting databases or taking down services or causing denial of service, because that's not our intention. Our intention is to gather enough evidence to know that something is exploitable so that the policyholders can then take action and prioritize remediation. And speaking of remediation, Craig, would love to understand from you what type of support would the policyholders get from Chubb, and then I can also cover some of the stuff that NetSPI is providing as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to stay up front. I mean, currently we're in a pilot phase with NetSPI. Any results that we identify or any derogatory information, vulnerabilities will not affect a policyholder's renewal terms. So that's important to know, and I think our policyholders and our broker partners would like to understand that a little bit better. So it's really for informational use only at this stage, while we formalize our partnership beyond the pilot. We want to destigmatize, right, the idea that you could be exposed to a vulnerability or a service that is exposed to the internet that maybe shouldn't be, or a remote management interface that is exposed to the internet that shouldn't be. We want to have a conversation. We want to review the findings, same findings again that our policyholders will have access to, highlight certain critical findings, certainly any vulnerabilities that we know are being exploited in the wild, or CISO's known as exploited vulnerability list, and walk through those findings with the policyholder, the underwriter, and the broker once the testing is complete. Once it is, and if there are findings, we stand ready. Our cyber advisory team is standing by to help policyholders remediate those issues. And I understand NetSPI is also offering to help policyholders identify and remediate those issues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. From our perspective too, is we like to work with our customers to make sure that they're being proactive in their security journey and the security challenges that they have. And you can't fix what you don't know exists, right? So if you have vulnerabilities that are out in the wild that are internet facing in particular, from our perspective, we find it imperative that our clients get notified of those issues as soon as possible. But also, when I get into the demo, I'll talk about this a little bit, where when we have vulnerabilities that we're reporting in platform, we're not just telling you that there's a vulnerability and the location. We're actually going in and putting validation steps to show you exactly how our testers went and tested step by step to make sure the vulnerability exists and is exploitable. We also gather additional evidence, which may be things like HTTP traffic that we're capturing or payloads that we sent as part of the testing. And then, of course, we also show you attribution. So we actually have a call chain that shows you exact steps that were taken. Was it something that was first identified by a tool and then validated by a human, or was it a human that identified something? Did an asset show up as vulnerable because there was an M&A activity that happened within the last week, and now you have a new organization that's part of your attack surface, and so on? All those attribution and chaining is actually included within the platform for anyone to view.
Yeah, the chain of custody information is very interesting, and I'll be looking forward to it in the demo. It really provides step-by-step guidance on how that exposure was identified, actionable information, where that exposure exists, to allow you, and with the help of Chubb's cyber advisory team or NetSPI's penetration testing team, can help you remediate those issues before it turns into an incident. So, Nabil, what are our policyholders receiving from NetSPI?
Yeah, that's a great question, Craig, because there's tremendous value in the partnership that we've built and what we're offering to the Chubb policyholders today. So what the policyholders are receiving today are essentially an attack surface assessment at no cost. So we're going in and doing a full discovery of everything we can find that's internet facing from an asset perspective that belongs to them, domains, IP addresses, SSL certificates, etc. And we are capturing that data and providing that to them through the platform. Then we are also going and identifying exposures, such as vulnerabilities or expiring certificates or domains that may be expiring soon, and things of that nature, to help the companies be more proactive in their approach to how they're going to solve the challenges that they have in that space. And then, of course, they have access to the whole platform and all of their data for a full year for when we came in and did that assessment. So as a point in time when they come to you for underwriting or when they come to you for that assessment, we conduct that assessment. Typically, it's within a 2-week period that we're conducting the testing and discovery. And the whole attack surface and any vulnerabilities and exposures that we discover are actually included at no cost to the policyholders.
Yeah, it's great. This delves a little bit deeper, right, into once they access the platform, how do they identify the vulnerabilities? We touched on this a little bit. Certainly there are prompts. We'll get into the demo a little bit later where they can find what was identified during the assessment. But if we can talk a little bit more about the chain of custody information, like I said, I know we talked about that a little bit, how they can see that evidence. There's screen grabs available as well, so they can visualize what their attack surface might look like from an external perspective. Can you walk us through a little bit about what else is identified in the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will, we'll get another chance to look at it in platform directly as well during a quick demo that we have planned later. But essentially what happens is once we conduct that assessment, throughout the assessment and post-assessment, the policyholders are going to get access to all of the data that Chubb is actually going to get access to as part of the underwriting process. So those include things like chain of operations that were conducted to go and identify a particular issue, to make sure that we know, who identified it, how was it exploited, what tools were run against it, and what types of indicators led to the identification of a specific exposure. That's number one. The second thing is whether it be screenshots or evidence or code or any proof of concepts or exploits that we create custom for that policyholder. Every exposure that we identify will include step-by-step instructions on how to reproduce that particular issue. So if your policyholder then wants to go back and determine for themselves how that issue was discovered, they can follow those instructions that will include payloads, include screenshots, and specific steps on how to go and replicate them. And then, of course, we're also going to provide risk rating to help organizations also prioritize based on the impact and severity of an issue on how to approach remediation and where they may want to focus their time, and how important is it to actually go fix it. So you get a risk scoring based on severity ratings such as critical, high, medium, low, and informational. Our focus is to identify the critical and high types of issues as much as possible. We understand that many organizations will risk accept or not really focus a lot of effort on low or informational issues. We understand that there's prioritization needed there, but our goal is to make sure that we are providing as much details as possible to help a business really understand the exposures that are out there and how important it would be for them to address them and how quickly they need to address them.
Yeah, prioritization is key. I mean, there's limited resources, right? Everybody knows this. Prioritizing which exposures, which vulnerabilities you're going to patch, which exposures you're going to remediate is critical. It helps our underwriters understand it better, helps our insured understand, what we're focused on, where they should be focused on, where they should focus their efforts for remediation. It's critical. The resources are too limited to tackle every problem we identify, and a lot of times we see that. We see a lot of minor findings being presented that are immaterial, right, to the current threat landscape. However, I mean, certainly we want everything to be taken a look at, and if there's time and effort and resources available, then fix as much as you can. But we know that's not the real world. People need to prioritize based on those resources.
So, Craig, it would be helpful, I think, for the policyholders to understand what type of benefits does Chubb get to underwriting, especially from an efficiency perspective, with the type of data that NetSPI's attack surface assessments provide?
Yeah, I think the first transparency, as we mentioned a few times throughout the conversation, the policyholder gets access to the same data we do, right? So there's no secrets here. We're going to focus on specific elements that we're tracking because of the threat landscape, with claims information. Any information that we have will be provided to the policyholder, and because of that, I mean, I think that's going to facilitate, and it has facilitated, important conversations about, again, prioritization, risk management, risk acceptance, and ultimately how that will impact their policy terms. And from that perspective, working with us in NetSPI during the pilot can yield benefits for their policy. We're offering, a 15% discount for policyholders that choose to participate in the pilot. We send out notifications through their brokers and agents when those policy participants have been identified. Certainly we want to roll this out post-pilot to all of our policyholders so they can identify, again, the most critical vulnerabilities they can proactively, understand what their attack surface looks like, and with, again, as few false positives that are possible in this type of testing environment, and really reap the benefits of NetSPI and ASM.
And Craig, I know we talked about this just at a high level earlier, but I was hoping you could maybe help get into the details a little bit more on how your team would be collaborating with the policyholders from leveraging the results of the data itself and then fixing and prioritizing remediation. Can you maybe dig a little deeper there on the actual collaboration that would happen between Chubb and the policyholders?
Yeah, and I think this really speaks to the partnership between Chubb and NetSPI, because we're both available, both before we begin the pilot, during the pilot, and after the pilot, to answer any questions not only our policyholders might have, but also our brokers and agent partners have about the process, about the findings, and about remediation. We're always available. We're happy to talk to our policyholders, and again, their broker partners, and walking them through the process and answering any questions they might have. We can also follow with demos, again, if they're interested, before we commence with the assessment. Again, our cyber advisor team, myself included, and the expert penetration testers at NetSPI are standing by to help with remediation efforts. We understand some of these things can be complicated and confusing to some of our policyholders, and we're happy to work with them as long as it takes to get things fixed that need to be fixed. Because again, a lot of the scanning, a lot of the exploitation is commoditized at this point. If we identify a vulnerability that we're concerned about, it's for a very good reason, right? Again, there are hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities that exist, but very few, under 5%, that actually are exploited in the wild. So if we're identifying a vulnerability, it's because it's been exploited, and we've seen activity to suggest that it could lead to an incident, such as ransomware. And finally, once we do have the findings, once the tests are complete, we schedule a meeting with all parties, policyholder, broker, agent, whoever it may be, at NetSPI and the Chubb team, to review the findings. Again, that's a critical component of this. And again, they'll have access to the platform, the NetSPI platform, for the foreseeable future, and can go back to it anytime they want to review those findings and prioritize the remediation.
The one piece too, Craig, that we didn't really talk through is that if the policyholders want to consume any other NetSPI services as well to help enrich and improve their proactive security approach, that's also available, and NetSPI is actually providing some preferential pricing there across the board to policyholders as well. So it doesn't have to be attack surface assessments. If there are other areas where the policyholders may have needs around penetration testing or breach and attack simulation as examples, NetSPI can provide those as well, and there is preferential pricing for Chubb policyholders in that space as well too.
Yeah, Nabil, thank you for bringing that up. Any of our Chubb policyholders that are interested in penetration testing, attack surface management, breach and attack simulation, they can all receive preferred pricing for NetSPI. Very attractive, I should say, pricing from NetSPI for any of those services. They can schedule a call with our cyber advisors to scope those engagements, to understand a little bit more about them. And certainly Chubb and NetSPI will work together to help scope any of those engagements and make it as affordable as we possibly can to get offensive security related services in the hands of our policyholders. Great point.
So Craig, what do you think?
So
should we just get into the demo? I mean, we've been talking a lot. I feel like we should talk about the process.
Yeah, no, thanks. Let's get the demo underway, and I think that'll help people understand exactly what ASM offers and what they'll see.
Awesome. Well, before I get into the demo itself, I wanted to make sure that we took a moment to kind of talk through the prerequisites of what it would take to get an attack surface assessment completed by one of the Chubb policyholders. So first of all, Chubb will actually be reaching out to the policyholders and pilot participants through the brokers and making sure that we get that appropriate sign off before we do anything. So this will not be a surprise. You should have the sign off happening that gives us permission to go and look at your attack surface, enumerate it, and look for potential exposures. The second piece that we often get is people think that there's a lot of homework, and we don't like giving our customers homework. So I want to at least get everyone to understand that what we need to get this started is very, very, very minimal. All we really need is the consent, and then just the top level domain of the company. So for example, for NetSPI it would be netspy.com. For Chubb it would be chubb.com. So all we need is that top level domain, and then we just need a main point of contact that we can work with and give access to the platform. And this can be multiple people if the policyholder has multiple people that they would like to have access to the platform, but we just need the point of contact so we can give them access to the platform that I'll be demoing and walking through what they'll have access to. And that's really it from a process perspective. Once we have consent and we have the data, such as the top level domain, NetSPI goes and gets started, and we give access to the points of contact to our platform. And when they come in, the first thing they'll have to do is sign up for their account and log in to the ASM platform. And then once you sign in, they'll be taken to the attack surface dashboard. As you can see here, in the attack surface dashboard, there's information around live IPs, live domains, what type of ports are open, etc. at a high level. We also have an additional view around an executive summary. What this does is that this allows you to look at all the different assets and vulnerabilities and ports that are open in a little more prioritized view, where you can understand where maybe some of the focus areas need to be. So this will have your data. Some of the data for demo purposes here has been blurred out so that it's not exposing anything sensitive. But here's an example of the type of data that you can expect to see in the executive summary dashboard. The next location where you'll probably find the most value is in the assets view. So if you click on the assets in the platform, you'll see it takes you to all the different types of assets that we are inventorying during our attack surface assessment, including domains and IP addresses, etc. So this kind of gives you a view of the details of what your attack surface contains. You can click through any of these to look at more details, but the piece I want to get to is actually exposures. So if you click on exposures, this is the section where you'll have information around vulnerabilities and all the products that you're exposing to the internet. So if you click on vulnerabilities itself here, it'll take you into the view where you'll have a list of all the vulnerabilities that we've identified as being truly exploitable and things that need to be addressed and need some focus. You can actually filter them by severity. So you can actually click on critical, for example, and it will filter the vulnerabilities to show you only the critical issues. And you can click on the vulnerability themselves. And when you click on them, it takes you into the detailed view about the vulnerability, where it's been verified, what the affected URL is, the time at which it was identified and updated, including a description as an example. When you scroll down, you actually get details around the screenshots or code that we identified during the process. And then, of course, the discovery chain, you can expand on it to understand exactly how a particular vulnerability, which user went and brute forced something to then actually expose this. In this case, it was a remote code execution vulnerability. And lastly, most of our clients and most of the policyholders will probably want to run a report to make sure that they have an understanding of everything that was discovered. That's pretty easy to do. In the vulnerabilities page, you can go and select all the vulnerabilities that were identified. Once you've selected them here, you click on bulk actions, and that takes you to an export PDF feature. When you click on it, it actually takes that and then goes and generates and downloads a report, which actually looks something like this. So it actually looks and feels like a penetration testing report that you can then send to developers, engineers, or whoever is responsible for actually performing remediation. You can obviously give them access to the platform as well, but you could also send them a report and generate a report if necessary. I'll pause here. Craig, any questions or anything you want me to elaborate on as part of the demo?
No, I think at a high level, that was really helpful. Thank you, Nabil, for walking through that. And again, once we identify any pilot participants, we're happy to jump on a call, jump on a Zoom call, walk through the platform in greater detail, walk through the process in greater detail, and finally, when the assessment's complete, walk through the findings together so we can get familiar with the assessment, the process, and the platform for all of our policyholders. So thank you for running through that.
Excellent. So Patrick, I think it's back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nabil. Thank you, Craig. Fantastic conversation and demo today, Nabil. You had me at no homework for the customer. We just need 3 simple things: consent, top-level domain, and a point of contact. So appreciate that always. And thanks to everyone who was able to tune in today. If we didn't get to your question in the chat or the Q&A, we will reach out and follow up and ensure that you have all the information you need. We will also be sharing a link to today's recording for those who missed or who would like to view it again. And in the meantime, if you have any further questions about today's topic, don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day.